How long does it take for your company to activate a new customer? Nuvo helps LBM suppliers get customers ready to buy on house accounts in minutes, not weeks, not days. With instant verifications, streamlined job sheets, and real-time credit insights, your team can start loading trucks while your competitors are still checking references. Check out Nuvo. Reach out to the team at nuvo.com, that's nuvo.com, to learn more. Hey there, I'm Thea Dudley, also known as the Credit Overlord, and welcome to LBM Talks Credit. We are the only podcast that talks trade credit in the lumber and building material space. Never miss an episode, stay tuned, and we're glad you're here. Hey, welcome to another episode of LBM Talks Credit. I'm Thea Dudley, your host, also known as the Credit Overlord. And joining me today is someone who is absolutely no stranger to the LBM trenches, industry veteran and legend, Bill Lee. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You wrote an article, and I know when we talked about it, you're like, I don't even remember writing that. I'm like, well, I love it. I loved it so much. I tore it out of the magazine and I had it in my inspiration pile. And it was from July of 2024. So I'm going to ask Sally to make sure we link it so that everyone else can read it. I loved this article that you wrote. It was the LBM salesperson's role in collections. And this was one of my absolute all-time favorite ones that you've ever written. So, I know we talked about what inspired you to write this.
Well, my pet peeve about credit and salespeople is that salespeople have never had any training about collecting, and quite often they're asked to get involved in collecting, and it just scares them to death. And I'm a salesperson. I'm not a collector. I was trying to outline the facts of collecting and where salespeople should fall in that area. Now, some do and some don't, but I think the credit manager would greatly appreciate salespeople being more willing to help them out and be more involved.
Oh, we would love that. But you hit the nail on the head when you said most salespeople don't receive any training in collections. And the argument is always, just as you said, well, it's my job to sell. Do I have to do everybody's job? Do I have to approve the credit? Do I have to collect it? I got to find the sale. It's like, Thea, what do you do back there? And it's like, we're a team, and I can give you keywords and phrases and help you navigate this a little bit. What I'm asking you is when things get tough to help me so that we get paid.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, that's a big a big advantage to salespeople if they can be in on what's going on in your mind, the credit manager's mind, and what can I do? What can I do to help out? I don't hear that too much, but that's what I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I don't hear that enough either. There are salesmen that will absolutely come in and they're like, "You having trouble getting paid? Let me talk." And there's others that are like, "Nope." But on the same token, there are credit managers that maybe aren't as user friendly. And so when we talk about that, we've talked about being the eyes and the ears, salesmen being that credit manager eyes and ears. And some of them don't understand what that meant. Where it's, hey, if you hear something, you're connected with that customer in a way that I, as the credit person, really am not going to see them the same way you do. I'm not going to their business. I'm not on their jobs. I'm hearing, just stuff via rumor, the industry rumor mill. But if you're that salesperson with boots on the ground, if you see something, come and put a bug in my ear. And the fear from salesmen is always, well, you're going to cut him off because you're going to freak out. And it's like, okay, I'm not going to freak out, but I don't want to get hit blind. We could have been more strategic with this customer had you opened up to me a little bit.
Exactly. If they could just be involved. And I think that's something that the organization is responsible for. I think it's the credit manager's responsibility to let's get together every now and then. Let's talk. Let's have a monthly meeting. Or if you spot a danger sign. Let's talk.
You brought up a point in this article that touched a real nerve. And when I brought it up to some other credit managers, they're like, that's never going to happen. We can't, everybody's against it. But I actually really loved it. And it was tying a salesman's commission to that whole collection piece and, reducing it as it got older or eliminating it when it went to collections or bad debt. And, I'd like to hear you talk more about that because that is, I don't want to say it's a punishment, but it's like, hey, there's an accountability for everybody involved in this.
Well, there are multiple ways of not punishing the salesperson, but just making them be involved and accountable, I guess I should say. Um, the what I advocate and what I talk to my clients about is if you're going to do this, let's number one, let's put it in the process when you hire people. Let them know up front what the rules are, and then number two, let's talk about what's fair or what's reasonable when you're going to take something out of the salesperson's commission. And what I think is reasonable is when you don't get paid, when the company cuts the customer off and you haven't been paid, I think he should sacrifice the commission he earned on the sales that were made after he was cut off. In other words, if he's paid up to a certain point, and you know this, and you continue to sell him, and the commission is going to suffer if that's the case. Now, if he's still on the books, if you, the credit manager, has agreed for him to stay on the books for another 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I don't think he should suffer. But if there's a situation where he has continued to sell the person, and you've shipped him, maybe there's something on the communication there. But I think he should be punished by taking away his commission that he's earned on uncollected bills.
Oh, as a credit manager, I completely agree. It's, hey, if you're asking me to take a risk on this customer and I've already said, oh, he's kind of, we're kind of on a cusp here, or, whatever the case is, companies can start accruing a percentage when it goes over 60 and another little percentage when it goes over another certain amount to where it's like, hey, if this is uncollectible or we have to send it to a collection agency or place a lien on it, all of our profit is getting eaten up by what we're paying in fees. I can't give you what I don't have, and we didn't make any money on this job. So I know the pushback I've heard from salesmen when this has come up is, well, I don't have control over who Thea approves, or, credit made that decision. It's like, yeah, that's not always the case. A lot of times it was a business decision, or, we sat down and went, all right, I'll take a risk on it. Don't leave me hanging, come back and, be my eyes and ears. And then sometimes people forget. And before you know it, they're like, hey, it wasn't my fault we didn't get, paid. It's like, well, we're not looking to fix blame here, but we didn't get paid either. So, all of us are taking a hit in the company. So why shouldn't we all share it?
Well, you look at the owner of the business is taking all the hit. I mean, he's
Good
losing
point.
whatever the company loses. When it comes to people down the line, credit managers, salespeople, sales manager, uh, they should have some. I'm sure in most companies, the credit manager is on some kind of incentive plan or something.
Oh, no, no. Bill, I'm going to stop you right there. Credit managers rarely have an incentive plan tied to that actual, like a commission structure like sales. We would love to see something come
I would
out
like
there.
to
It
see
might be
that.
tied to their year-end bonus, but
Well, incentive plans to me are kind of like what I advocate about having meetings and talking and including the
okay.
credit manager in a meeting with the salespeople. They don't really know the credit manager. I mean, they know them, but they don't know what they're up against. They don't know what they deal with. They don't know what you expect of them. And I think having a meeting about once a month, not a 2 or 3 day meeting, but just an hour or two, where you just talk about situations that are going on that maybe the salesperson knows more about than you know about. And it's a way to keep everyone involved and aware of what's going on with the customer base with respect to money. Are you about to lose? Or are you about to? Is everything fine?
True. I love the idea of always being included with that sales team so they get to know the credit person, and you start developing your philosophies on sales and credit together instead of just in a vacuum. But I do want to back up to that commission piece for a minute. When you introduce that to sales teams or, leadership teams at companies that you go in and work with, what's the usual response, and how do you sell it to them? I mean, what's the pushback, and how do you get them over the hump?
Well, it's not. It's as I said in the article, it's controversial.
That is true. You did say that right up front.
Salespeople don't like involved in collections, but it's because they don't know how. They've never been taught. It's a mystery to them, and they try to stay away from it. I'm a salesperson. I'm not a collector. Well, when you're out collecting, you're a salesperson because you're trying to sell them on paying you. So it's a fine line between your two jobs, and I think that the most important thing in selling people a buy-in on something like that is let's have periodic meetings where we discuss things like this and get everybody's input so they don't feel like it's just rammed down their throat. And
That's a good point.
and what are the rules? Usually when it's discussed and you can put in your 2 cents worth and you've been heard. I think they accept it, or at least it's been my experience that they accept it much more readily than if you just here's the new rule.
And you push it out in an email so that you don't have to hear people like fuss about it.
Right.
I think it would be great if you're going to roll out something that it's like, look, the commission is tied into collections and all of having that program, then have the credit manager come in and it's like, let's do a mini course in here's how to have a conversation about money. And I don't expect them to know everything I know, but at least know how to start it and how to extract a little information.
Well, sales, in sales, you're not just selling products. A lot of times you're selling something else like pay us, something that they're not doing. If they're not purchasing windows from you, you try to sell them on buying windows. If they're not paying us, we would try to sell them on paying us. Because if you don't pay us, I'm going to lose a customer. And I like you guys. I think we have a good relationship. But we can't do business if you don't pay your bill.
So why do you think salesmen just have such a hard time saying that? Is it just fear or they don't want to? Or I know you've said lack of education, but geez, it's got to be more than that. We grow up going, hey, mom, can I have $5? It's kind of ingrained. So you're a salesman. You ask for stuff all the time.
There's something else to it. And it's that salespeople don't like controversy. Your sales credit managers are kind of born with the willingness to be controversial. You pay me or else, And
Well, we don't show. It's not that we court conflict. Or it's just we know that's part of the job, and you either are going to accept it and learn how to deal with it effectively to be a good credit manager, or you're going to find a new job.
I do a lot of testing, and that's something I've done for years and years. And you get insight into people much more thoroughly than you would just talking to them, even though you are taught to look for these characteristics. But a salesperson likes a favorable environment. That's what they thrive on. And if it gets to be negative, it gets to be unfavorable, they lose altitude. And they do everything in their power to avoid controversy. And you can't, it's kind of hard to ask for money sometimes without being a little bit controversial. But But I think that a salesperson, the position I take is that I need your business. I like you a lot. You're a good customer of mine. I hope I'm a good salesperson for you. But I cannot continue selling you if you don't pay your bill. Now, what can I do to help?
See, that sounds yeah, right there. It's like, I'm going to print that and just start handing it out to salespeople where it's like, that's a beautiful way to say it. It's non-threatening and it's to the point. And then you can go back to your credit manager and say, look, this is the conversation I had with them. Here's what they said. And at least then you're sharing information and you've cracked that walnut to kind of help us. The guy's not calling me back or he's dodging me or, many broken promises. They might tell you stuff they're never going to tell me.
Well, those words that I used are they're they're kind of rote words. They work. They're not controversial. You're complimenting the person that you're a great customer, you're a good friend, but I can't continue having the relationship with you I have now if you don't pay your bill. What can I do to help? Now and then you shut up and let them talk. And salespeople can do what they're trained to do with practicing. And you can't just hear someone say something like that and automatically start using that phrase. That's training is a big part of everything.
So I love the idea of getting able to go in and have some of that training with salespeople. I know we do have, like in every group, you're going to have some resistance, but when you look at, because I've talked to some owners that are like, look, credit is credit and sales are sales and never the two shall meet. But what do you think the long-term cost of keeping those two departments separate is?
It definitely costs because you have two people that are kind of on the wrong side of the fence. I mean, you're not being cooperative. You're not working together. And I don't think it's so much as the chain of command, but it's having people that are dependent on each other. You're dependent on what they do, and they're dependent on what you do, and you're partners. And let's start thinking of each other as partners. We're both in this thing for the company, and if we don't do our jobs, good things are not going to continue happening. Bad things are going to start happening. And as long as you think of yourselves as partners, you're not my enemy. If I'm a salesperson, you're my partner, and you've got a side of it and I have a side of it. And when what I'm doing is not working and what you're doing is not working, well, let's get together and discuss how we can go at this thing more productively.
That was very well said. I swear I'm going to print
Well,
all
thank
of
you.
that on a card and hand it out and just go, hey, you're a good friend. I love you as a customer. I need you to pay me, or things are going to get kind of dark.
Thea, do
So
you do any
I love that.
training? Do you do any training yourself?
I do.
Well,
We have
well, that's. I mean, at least they know who to call and who to talk to. Because I really didn't know anybody that did training on collections. Now I should have known that because I read your articles and we talk from time to time. But that's something that is a tremendous investment. I don't mean by tremendous being a high investment. I mean it's something that really helps the organization if we're all on the same page.
Well, I think you did a pretty good job there, coaching salespeople. But I do think that there needs to be more intertwined. I've been really very lucky to be able to attend a lot of sales training meetings, and what we do isn't really that much different. We're both selling customers on an idea or a product. My product just happens to be keeping your account in good standing. So there's not that much difference. You can learn a lot that way. And this was an article, and we're going to link it below because I absolutely love this one. So, Bill, what do you hope that readers and listeners take away from the article and the conversation? What is like what's the bigger message to the LBM industry about this topic, about that whole credit collections and commissions? So,
Well, from my position, from what I see, and I'll go back to say the same things I repeated earlier, is that training is non-existent, practically non-existent, I should say, when it comes to salespeople. They just don't know what to say and how to say it and when to say it. And I'll say that on credit managers. They're less sensitive to salespeople's personality. They're different than your personality. And you're hired for that reason. When you can handle conflict, and salespeople have a challenge with conflict. It's not their favorite thing to do. Now, I don't mean all of them that are that way, but the majority are that way. So I think we need to make sure that they're aware of their role in collections, make sure they're aware of that they're going to be your partner and not you're not independent, you're not each other's enemy. And the final thing is training for management to realize that training is a good thing. Usually they pay for training for salespeople. I don't mean always, but they
oh
most
no, there's like sales training all over. There's very limited sales training in dealing with a past due customer, or having that piece of collections. But I will, in defense of salespeople, I will go back and say, credit managers need to step up too. You
yeah.
need to be willing to train, and you need to be willing to learn. Spend a day riding around with your salesperson and see what they go through, because they have a whole different view of this process.
When I was out there training salespeople, a lot of times managers would hire me, owners would hire me, and ask me to ride with their salespeople and hear what they say. Where do they need training? Uh, and gently tell them, that's not really not the best way to approach this, and and practice on the wording to use to get the best results. And I would imagine that if you were writing with a salesperson in a credit situation, you would be surprised or disappointed in what they say, how they say it.
Well, I've had both experiences. I've had where took a salesman out, and he was a younger salesman. We were supposed to meet with the customer. I was going to talk to them about their financials. When we first walked in, you have your pleasantries. He was supposed to go get a glass of water or something and just excuse himself so I could meet with the CFO and have that financial conversation. I could not get this boy to shut up. He just went on and groveling and apologizing. And by the end of it, I'm like, you know what? We might as well go home, because you're not going to leave. He's not going to show financials in front of you. And I'm going to take you in the car. And I was so mad. And, the whole trip was a giant waste. But then I've had the opposite end of that, where I've gone out with salesmen and they were phenomenal. And they're like, look, I brought Thea here. We're going to talk about this. We're all a team. If you want, and the salesman flat out said, if you want me to excuse myself, I will. And, you can have the conversation in front of them or not, depending on how sensitive the owner was. But they set it up really well. So it can be done. I think it involves both sides, both the credit person and the salesperson being willing.
Be aware that what you're just described about that salesperson that was apologizing, and that's the inability to deal with conflict. It makes them nervous. It makes them their stomach churns, and it's just very very difficult for them to do that. Now, if you use testing, that points out that characteristic. Now, I don't mean to fire the person if they can't deal with conflict, because most of their time is dealt in a persuasive environment. But if you do have someone with that characteristic, then the training can teach them the way to approach collecting, uh, you can memorize what to say.
Well, I wanted to take him out and fire him that day. We got in the car and that little boy said, I think it went really well. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, you do? Oh, yeah. Just drive us back to the airport before I choke you out in this car. But I do think there's a balance in there. And you're right, it all does go back to training and everything. So, Bill, I love that you took time out to come onto the podcast and talk about, again, this article is one of my absolute favorites. So thank you so much for all your time today.
Listen, I enjoyed it very, very much. Good luck to you.
Well, we'll have to go for pizza again because that was pretty dang good.
Yeah, let's do that.
That was yummy. Well, that's it for today's episode of LBM Talks Credit. And if you're facing resistance in your organization, don't give up. Get strategic, get some education involved. And if you haven't read this column of Bill's in LBM Journal from last year, we're going to link it below. And thanks to our sponsor, Nuvo. Again, don't give up, get strategic. You might want to get Nuvo. And we thank you all, and we'll see you next time on LBM Talks Credit.